Hey guys, this is Cody back here once again for a video. First off, I just want to say thank you so much to all of you who have subscribed to this channel. When I first started this channel, I really didn't know if a lot of people would be into, just you listen to me talk about music or whatever, but, now that I've got up to about 15 subscribers, so I just want to say thank you guys so much. That's such a, that means a lot to me, and it's such a motivation. But anyway guys, I'm back here once again, and for this video, I'm going to be doing actually something different. This is actually going to be the first in a series of videos that I plan on doing where I talk about my favorite rock and roll biographies or my favorite rock and roll books. If you guys remember, I did a series of videos where I showed off all of my books. Well, I thought it'd be a cool idea to actually take them all out and give them reviews. And yeah, this has just been something that something that I do plan on doing for a while. I plan on doing a lot of them. I plan on reviewing basically all the books that I have. So if you guys think that this is a good idea, definitely like this video or give it a comment down below if you guys want to see more of these videos. But anyway guys, without further ado, I'm going to get right into it. So the first book that I chose to do a review of was actually the first biography book that I ever got. I actually got it, I've had it for years. I don't even remember how long I've had it, but it was the first book I ever got, and it's about my favorite rock and roll band of all time. If you guys have watched my videos, you guys know who I'm talking about. But the book is Watch You Bleed, The Saga of Guns N' Roses by Stephen Davis. And this book was released in 2009, and it is, as you can see, not in great condition because I've had it for a really long time. But, basically, how I'm going to do these reviews is I'm going to give an overview of the whole book, and I'll tell you guys what I liked about it and what I didn't like. So I'm going to go and get started. So the book actually begins in the 70s, talking about Led Zeppelin. And Stephen Davis, the author of the book, is probably most known for his biography on Led Zeppelin, Hammer of the Gods. And so he basically goes into detail at the beginning of the chapter about, how Led Zeppelin was pretty much the kings of rock and roll at that point of hard rock, and, he talks about the influence that they had on every single other rock band that came out during that era, including, of course, Guns N' Roses. And then is when he goes back to into the 60s, 1962 to be exact. And this is when, he talks about the birth of Axl Rose, and he talks about Axl's early life. And from the point the book began, from the point, he starts talking about him, you can almost pinpoint where Axl's anger comes from. He talks about, of how that Axl's parents, they got a divorce, and of how that he was actually abused by his father. And then when his mom remarried, he was actually sexually abused by his stepfather and kidnapped. And he talks about how that it was something that, the family of his mom talks about. They used to talk about it with a lot of shame, and then they immediately just stopped talking about it altogether and would not even mention it. So stuff like this, happening when Axl was really young, you can really pinpoint where his anger comes from. Because he feels really down. He feels really bad that his mom didn't stick up for him when his dad was beating him basically, and because of course she feared his dad, but he still feels like that his mom needed it, and you can really see the gap that begins with Axl, and his mother, and it really goes. They go into a lot of detail about Axl's family during that point. They also go into detail of how he sang in choir and what his elementary school and middle school years were like, being an outcast, being unwanted, But, as far as being popular, he wasn't popular, but people knew about him. He sang in choir, and, they go into a lot of detail about that. And then, of course, they go into, when he started high school, which is where he meets Izzy Stradlin. And if how Izzy Stradlin, of course, they give detail about his life, and then they go into, them wanting to form a band together. They meet up with the original guitarist Chris Webber, who actually has an interview in this book, and he talks about the early years of being with Axl, playing, trying to record or whatever with the band Rose. They want to start off with Rose, and then which later on becomes Hollywood Rose. If you guys know about Guns N' Roses, then the different bands that they all went to become Guns N' Roses. But they talk about, you know, the first show with Axl and Izzy, and it pretty much, you know, of how he became very angry on the show. Something happened, and that was sort of the beginning of, you know, seeing his anger. And you know, they go into that. They go into when they changed their name to Hollywood Rose, and then they go into, of course, when they started playing shows. Then they also go in. The book also goes into detail about Slash's life when he, you know, started out, when he was born, and they talk about the band that he was playing in, which was called Black Sheep, which actually was touring with LA Guns at that point. You know, after Axl had left Hollywood Rose, he began singing for a band called LA Guns, and they talk about when they first met. There's actually two stories on how the two Axl and Slash both met. Vicky Hamilton, who was Guns N' Roses' original manager and the person that basically got them their record deal with Geffen, said that she introduced him. But Slash tells another story. There's no interviews with the original Guns N' Roses you know, lineup. They're all just interviews from the past. But they talk about, basically, they both decided that they wanted to play together, and thus Guns N' Roses is born. And then they go into detail of the recording process of Appetite for Destruction, and of how it took nearly a year before that album even took off. You know, up until they released the single Sweet Child of Mine, you know, there really was nobody that was like listening to it. You know, except for maybe some die-hard Guns N' Roses fans, and, you know, they go into detail about their first tour as well, called the Hell Tour, which was basically a disaster. You know, they played a bunch of shows, and then they ended up breaking down, and they had to get back to LA, and you know, they go into a lot of detail about, you know, they go into a lot of detail about the hardship that Guns N' Roses went through in their early days before they even, you know, even had a hit single, and you could really tell how the band is bonded now, because during those first years, you know, it really bonded the band, going through all that turmoil, you know, on their first tour and their album not selling well, and, you know, you could really see what stuck Guns N' Roses together. But, you know, of course, Appetite for Destruction later on becomes a huge hit, and, you know, they start going on their tour. And, of course, it goes into detail about, you know, their performance at Download Festival when those people got trampled and Guns N' Roses was officially labeled, you know, the most dangerous band in the world. You know, they go into, you know, of course, all the tours that they did, the GNR Lies album, and their the controversy around the song One in a Million. And then they started talking about how that Izzy felt. He never wanted the band to get as big as it did, and they go into detail of how uncomfortable he felt with fame. And eventually, you know, his sort of split with Guns sort of begins, even at that time period. But they also go into a lot of detail about the drugs and alcohol. The whole band was, you know, basically druggies at that point. But mostly they do go into detail about Steven Adler. And they go into when Steven is going to get fired from Guns N' Roses. But surprisingly, Axl is the last person that wanted to fire Steven. You know, even though Axl is known for wanting, you know, supposedly firing everybody and, you know, trying to get everybody out. But actually, you know, he was actually the last person that wanted to fire Steven. You know, everybody liked Steven, but I think the rest of the band felt that the drugs were basically killing him, and he needed to get out of it in a way. It wasn't until after Steven was fired that he started blaming the band for his drug addiction, and that's when the split between Axl and Steven started. You know, which, to be honest, you know, I'm sure if Steven wasn't in that environment, then maybe he wouldn't have been on so many drugs at that point, or he wouldn't have gotten to it. But so in some way, I see how I understand that it really wasn't the band member's fault, but maybe if Steven wasn't in that environment, he might not have gotten on drugs, you know. But you know, they go into detail about that, and then of course they go into detail about Izzy Stradlin leaving. You know, because like I said, you know, Izzy was one of the people that were just happy enough to play in clubs, and when he left, You know, of course, that it affected the band tremendously, especially Axl, but you know, just had to happen, and he's happy for that way. So to go into detail about him leaving and about them bringing in Gilby Clarke, and basically that is the beginning of the end for Guns in some sort of way. You know, they finish up the tour, and then they record the Spaghetti Incident album, which is, you know, kind of the flop cover album that they did. And then from that point on, the book goes into a lot of detail about how every member of Guns ended up leaving. Of course, you know, Slash was one of the first to leave, you know, and of how that when Slash leaves, he talks about it, of how that a huge weight had been lifted off of him, and he felt finally free. And he, of course, went on to form his own band, you know, Slash the Snake Pit. Then they talk about Matt Sorum being fired, and Duff McKagan in 1995 finally decided to leave because he just could not justify being in the band anymore, and finally it's being gone. And you know, it goes into a bit of detail about the new members. You know, they started their own bands. You know, they're doing solo stuff. Of course, Slash, you know, he got really successful with Snake Pit and Velvet Revolver. But it does give detail about Axl recording Chinese Democracy, and it does talk a bit about all the new band members that have coming in, and then of course the detail, of course, Guns returning in 2000 to play, you know, in Los Angeles, and then their performance at the MTV Video Music Awards. And the book finally concludes with the release of Chinese Democracy, and a bit of information after. There's an interview that Axl posted on Guns N' Roses' website that is included in a bit in the book, which was actually taken in 2009. And that's pretty much the entire story in a nutshell. But now I'm going to get into a bit about what I liked about the book and what I didn't like. Now, first off, I want to say this book is really well written, for the most part, I will say. You know, especially in the beginning, there's actually a little chapter where it talks about Axl and Izzy walking into Los Angeles for the first time, and it really feels like you're reading a novel. And it's really, you know, it's a really cool way of doing it. You know, and I really like that. I liked how it's really human, is how I describe it, human. But you know, they talk about that. I'm really well written. Getting tongue tied here, but they go into a lot of detail about, give you a lot of detail. I learned so much about this book because, like I said, I've never read a single book about Guns N' Roses until I read this. I didn't even read anything else about them, like online or whatever. So for me, coming into this, pretty much all the information I have about Guns was through this book, and then I, of course, read everything else there is to know about Guns and as much information as I could. So it's a really well-written book. You know, it tells a really great story about a great rock and roll band, you know, from when they rose to stardom to when they basically destroyed themselves, you know, in a way. But yeah, so for all the good parts about this book, it's really well written. Now I'm going to get into what is bad about the book. One of the main things this book is known for is all the factual errors. And that's not good when the main thing that this book is known for are all the errors. The first and foremost, Stephen Davis got Axl Rose's birth date wrong. Actually, in the book, he actually has, and it's not even a couple days wrong, it's a whole, like, a month or so wrong. He actually has, you know, Axl Rose's birth date is actually wrong. And when you're writing a biography about a band, it's really bad when you get the birth date of the lead singer of the band you're writing about wrong, you know. And it's just a really bad error that every Guns N' Roses fan should know. I mean, I knew it when I first read it that, yeah, that's not the right date, you know. He gets a lot of other things wrong about it too, of how that's apparently Bon Jovi's album Slippery When Wet came out in 1987, which is not. And it's just information that every rock and roll fan, or a big rock and roll fan, would know, or a big Guns N' Roses fan would know. And it's these little bit of information that's wrong, and it kind of ruins the book in some way because it's just common knowledge stuff, and it's wrong. Another thing I didn't like about the book is it doesn't really go into any detail about the new Guns N' Roses members. They talk a bit about the first guitar player, Paul Tobias, about he was in Nine Inch Nails, and then the guitarist Buckethead, who had some solo work done. But other than that, there's really no good information about the new members, which I really do wish that he would have included, you know, some information about the new members. But unfortunately for this book, there is none. So, can I recommend this book for anybody? I'd say if you've never read anything about Guns N' Roses and you just want to read a book that has 80% good information in it, then go for it. But if you're a true fan of Guns N' Roses, I would say skip this one. Because even though it's very well written, it's a very good book. I'm not saying it's bad at all. But with the factual errors that it has in it, and it's stuff that every Guns N' Roses fan, like I said, would probably know, it kind of ruins the book in some way. So, if you're a true Guns N' Roses fan, then you probably already know everything that there is in this book, and you really don't need to get this. I would recommend picking up another book about them. I plan on doing it as well. But if you just want to read a book about Guns N' Roses and you're not like a huge fan by them, you just want to read what it was like for them throughout their entire career, then I'd say give it a shot. You know, because it's even though, despite its factual errors and despite some of the stuff in it, it's still a well-written book and it's still enjoyable to read. You know, so really, it's up to you, you know, if you think that, you know, I'd recommend reading more reviews on it or whatever. You can go on Amazon and read some reviews. If you think it sounds like you'd be interested in reading, then I'd recommend picking it up. Even if you are a Guns N' Roses fan and you might be turned off by some of the bad errors in it, it's still a well-written book, you know, despite those. So, all in all, I'd give the book 3 stars. You know, it's nowhere close to being the best Guns N' Roses biography, but at the same time, it's not the worst one I've read so far. You know, and, yeah, I did enjoy reading it, despite its flaws. So, yeah. You can get it on Amazon. You can pretty much get it anywhere, so I'd recommend it. It's called Watch You Bleed, The Saga of Guns N' Roses by Charles R. Cross. But anyway, guys, that is my review for the book. Like I said, if you guys have read this book, definitely let me know what you guys think about it. Leave a comment down below. If you guys want to see more book reviews by me, again, leave a comment down below. Let me know. Because I plan on doing a lot more you know, book reviews on this channel, music book reviews. But anyway, guys, thanks for watching my review for Watch You Bleed, The Saga of Guns N' Roses. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I've got a lot more reviews on books coming up, and I've got a lot more music-related videos coming up soon. So thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing to everyone. If you haven't subscribed already, feel free to. And yeah, so anyway, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see everybody later.